Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our presenters. First, we will hear from Dr. Lanyan or Lucy Fang, Acting Division Director in the Division of Quantitative Methods and Modeling, or DQMM, within the Office of Research and Standards, or ORS, and the Office of Generic Drugs, or OGD, within CDER at FDA. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Eleftheria Tsakalozou, Lead Pharmacologist in the Division of Quantitative Methods and Modeling within ORS within OGD. And next, we will hear from Dr. Erin Skoda, Supervisory Chemist in the Division of Product Quality Assessment 18 within the Office of Product Quality Assessment 3 and the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, or OPQ. Please join me in welcoming our first presenter, Dr. Lucy Fang.
Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Model Master Files, Advancing Modeling Simulation in Generic Drug Development and Regulatory Submissions. To kick off today's discussion, I will provide an introduction and overview of the Model Master File. This is my disclaimer. This presentation reflects the views of mine, should not be considered to represent FDA's views or policies. Modeling simulation as modern tools for drug development is making drug development and regulatory assessment more efficient. For new drug development, modeling simulation is an integral part for almost all NME, NDAs, and BLAs. For generic drug development, the huge volume of generic drug applications especially translates into numerous opportunities for the use of quantitative methods and modeling. But the utilization is nice. The Office of Generic Drugs is currently taking advantage of the modeling simulation. It's deploying the information to industry on best practice for using modeling simulation to modernize generic drug development. To promote the use of modeling simulation in generic drug development, the Office of Generic Drugs launched the MIE Model Integrated Evidence Pilot Program in October 2023. The pilot program allows enhanced scientific communications on a broad range of quantitative methods and modeling techniques to address generic drug development issues or questions that are either out of the scope or cannot be sufficiently addressed by the existing pre-ANDA and ANDA scientific meetings, such as common modeling issues across multiple products or complex modeling approaches for non-complex products. This serves as a dedicated regulatory platform for interactions on MIE to foster early and focused interactions between industry and FDA on MIE approaches for establishing bioequivalence in generic drug development. Here are the expected benefits. For industry, this will accelerate the timeline by reducing the sample size and increasing the power for good products. It will also save the drug development cost, as modeling simulation can potentially replace the expensive comparative clinical endpoint studies. This will allow alignment in terms of study design, modeling approach, and technical feasibility. It will help enhance the clarity through the early communications between FDA and the industry, as the FDA can provide direct feedback on the technical expectations, additional data needs, and dedicated time and effort. For FDA, this will increase the efficiency to handle multiple products, reduce the number of cycles for drug approval, and help establish ecosystem with industry to develop effective B approaches. So, what if models can be reused? Shared models or commonly used models would make it easier and less risky for applicants to use modeling simulation approaches. Shared models will make regulatory assessment more efficient and consistent. Model master file is such a concept that would allow models to be shared and reused. We use Type V drug master file for model master file submissions, aiming at model sharing and model reusability. Drug master file is an extending regulatory mechanism for sharing files of different types. It has realized benefits for both industry and FDA. It has established the guidance, policy, and infrastructure. Model master file submission through Type V drug master file allows the owner of the models to submit data information that multiple applicants can cross-reference use the same models. We have had discussions on model sharing and model master file at the FDA CRCG workshop since 2021. We first discussed the challenges and opportunities to enhance model sharing upon regulatory use. In the subsequent year, we discussed model sharing, acceptance, and communications with FDA. Last year, we had our dedicated workshop discussions on consideration and potential regulatory applications for a model master file. We summarize all the discussions and take-home messages in this meeting report on the role of model master file for sharing, acceptance, and communication with FDA. In January this year, we officially kicked off this initiative through the posting of this FR notice. Use of a Type V drug master file for model master file submissions to support ANDA. We are still accepting comments. If you have not done so, we would strongly recommend you share with us your comments by April 17th. So what is a model master file? Model master file or model master file submission refers to a set of information and data in an in silico quantitative model or modeling platform supported by sufficient verification and validation. Model master files can be established to support the MIE in a broad range of quantitative models, including but not limited to PBPK, CFD, PAPK, and mechanistic IVIVC models. Here are some benefits for model sharing, standardization, and archiving in the regulatory submissions. For regulatory agencies, it will break down organizational silos when conducting modeling and simulation assessments by allowing access to previous comments on the same subject and/or modeling and simulation practice with a similar regulatory use. It will enhance the review consistency, quality, and efficiency. For the industry, it will save time and effort to duplicate the same model or modeling practice. It will reduce communication costs with FDA on modeling approaches. It will increase confidence in the use of modeling approaches for developing complex drug products. Together, this will build a transparent and positive ecosystem for the use of models. It will maximize the impact of modeling simulation approaches, especially for regulatory use. It will provide incentive to the community on developing models with practical regulatory impacts. So what does this mean for generic drug program? Generic drug program has a very large scale. Nearly 1,000 generic drug applications are submitted every year. Modeling simulation can streamline generic drug development program through integrating in vitro characterization and in vivo performance, as well as using efficient and sensitive studies. Given the large scale, efficiency is essential. Generic drug development builds on the established safety and efficacy of an approved new drug product. Model master file would allow the same models to be used in the development of different products. For generics, many reference products have multiple ANDA submissions, so consistency is essential. Modeling simulation should be evaluated similarly for all similarly submitted ANDA applications. Model master file can be referenced by multiple applications for a similar purpose of use, therefore improve the model sharing, model standardization, and regulatory consistency. Importantly, it will reduce the risk to innovation, including a modeling approach in applications to FDA has some risk. as related to the model verification and validation and relevance for the intended use. We have discussed a lot of those topics with the applicants in pre and product development meetings and MIE pilot meetings. Model master files can build confidence that the approach has been documented appropriately and has been used successfully. To summarize my talk, modeling simulation makes drug development more efficient, particularly for generic drugs. Model master files can advance the use of modeling simulation in generic drug development program. Type V drug master file for model master file submissions provides a regulatory mechanism aiming at the model sharing and model reusability. It will improve the regulatory efficiency and consistency. Lastly, I want to thank the individuals on this slide deck for their contributions to this very important initiative. As I shared, we kicked off the discussions on model master file back in 2021, and we are very pleased that we finally established the regulatory pathway to move this forward. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Eleftheria Tsakalozou to start her presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for the nice introduction. Hello everyone, this is Eleftheria Tsakalozou. I'm a lead at the Division of Quantitative Methods and Modeling, the Office of Research and Standards, the Office of Generic Drugs. Today I will be discussing with you how to develop and submit a model master file. Here's my disclaimer. I will begin my presentation with a short definition of what a model master file is, as well as some background information. I will move into describing what are the different types of MMF, what would be the content of an MMF, and what would be the structure of an MMF. Hopefully this will be useful information towards how to develop an MMF. I will walk you through some MMF mock examples, and I will end with some details on how to submit an MMF. The Model Master File framework was first introduced in 2021 and further discussed in 2022 during 2 public workshops co-hosted by the FDA and the Center of Research on Complex Generics, CRCG. These workshops were followed up by a publication that you see here on your screen in 2024 on the role of model master files for sharing, acceptance, and communication with the FDA. On May 2nd and 3rd of last year, CRCG and the FDA co-hosted a public workshop dedicated on the considerations and potential regulatory applications for the model master file. Discussions on the incentives as well as challenges associated with the MMF framework are summarized now in a themed issue by Pharmaceutical Research. Earlier this year, in January, a federal notice became public on the use of Type V drug master files for model master file submissions to support ANDAs. A public docket has been submitted and it is requesting comments by April 17, 2025. A model master file or a model master file submission refers to a set of information and data on an in silico quantitative model or modeling platform supported by sufficient verification and validation. MMFs can be established to support the model integrated evidence in a broad range of quantitative models, including but not limited to PBPK, CFD, POP-PK, and mechanistic in vitro in vivo correlation models. In other words, model master file submissions aim to support model integrated evidence approaches. They are quantitative methods and modeling that include quantitative clinical pharmacology toolsets such as population pharmacokinetics, mechanistic modeling such as physiologically based pharmacokinetic and physiologically based biopharmaceutics models, computational fluid dynamic models, in vitro and in vivo correlations. Model master files may also include advanced data analytics, such as machine learning and artificial intelligence methodologies. Now let's go over certain types of MMFs. A drug product specific model that is informed by critical quality attributes specific to a drug product can be an MMF. An in silico framework for products following the same route of administration, for instance, an organ model, the eye or the skin, can be considered a type of MMF. Finally, a modeling methodology or a framework for a particular context of use, for instance, for performing virtual bioequivalence assessments, can be another type of MMF. Model master file submissions can benefit both regulatory agencies and pharmaceutical industry. MMFs can improve efficiency, consistency, as well as interdisciplinary communication. They can help build institutional knowledge, and they ensure the confidentiality of sensitive proprietary information. For pharmaceutical companies, MMFs can reduce time, cost, and other resources related to development and regulatory submissions of modeling and simulation approaches. They can reduce data redundancy and can improve modeling and simulation availability. Now let's shift the discussion towards the development of a model master file. Here's a table that may serve as a template helping to develop that model master file. A title is necessary, and it is important that it includes the term model master file. The MMF holder may also include the type of the submission, the model master file. The main submission file is divided into 5 components. The first one is the regulatory context of use for the modeling and simulation approach contained within the MMF. And the second component is the scientific rationale supporting this modeling and simulation approach. Third is the data analysis. The data analysis includes the model analysis report, which includes the model objective, model development, verification, and validation processes, a summary of the model performance assessment. The data analysis also is accompanied by model and data files. These, especially the data files, may be in-house or literature data or other sources of information that were utilized for model development. Finally, the last component of the model master file is the orientation file, a list of version-controlled model files and supporting data sets, their sources, and their role within the model master file. Model master file submissions are essentially modeling and simulation approaches meant to support regulatory submissions. Applicants, and in this case, DMF holders, are encouraged to follow best practices when documenting these modeling and simulation approaches. And here are some guidances that they might find helpful. To further improve our understanding on what model master files are, I would like to go over 4 MMF mock examples. The first one is a systemic disposition model for active ingredient X supporting the development of fit-for-purpose PBPK models for oral and non-oral routes of administration. The second one is a modeling methodology for drug Y to assess the impact of particle size distribution of drug X soft gel capsules on bioequivalence. The third example is a modeling methodology on an MIE-supported alternative B study design for 1 or more long-acting injectables. And the fourth example is an in vitro model for predicting immunogenicity risks in peptide and protein-based therapeutics across different regulatory submissions. Begin with mock example number 1 and utilize the template that I shared in one of my previous slides. Model master file title, model master file systemic disposition model for active ingredient X. Model master file is included in the title of the model master file. The type, this is a model development, verification, and validation process for its intended purpose for an active ingredient. What is the regulatory context of use? The systemic disposition PBPK model for active ingredient X describes the disposition and elimination of X following its intravenous administration. This model can support the development of fit-for-purpose PBPK models for oral and non-oral routes of administration. Finally, briefly explain what is the scientific rationale behind that model master file. The model itself captured the physicochemical properties and the ADME characteristics of drug X and was appropriately verified and validated with data from publicly available sources or in-house data. Internal and external validation was performed at a sufficient level of detail and demonstrated the satisfactory performance of the systemic disposition PBPK model. Potential applications involve coupling the systemic disposition model to oral absorption PBPK models or PBPK models for locally acting drug products for active ingredient X. The model master file submission, per the template provided previously, should include data analysis supporting the modeling and simulation approach. The modeling analysis report, including model objective, model development verification and validation process, as well as a summary of the performance assessment of the model against pre-selected criteria. The MMF should also include models and data files, literature or other sources of information, and an orientation file that guides the reviewer, the assessor, through the material submitted in a model master file submission. You will notice here that prior to the name of every single one of these files, the material submitted, the DMF holder is asked to include the DMF number associated with the submission. So in the case of example 1, this model master file can then be used to support a regulatory application associated with an oral absorption PBPK model, a PBPK model for an oral inhaled drug product, a PBPK model for a dermatological drug product, or a PBPK model for an injectable product. This underlines the reusability and shareability of the model master file submission. Mock example 2 is a model master file on a modeling methodology of drug Y, assessing the impact of particle size distribution of drug Y soft gel capsules on bioequivalence. Just like in mock example 1, the model master file type is model development verification and validation process for its intended purpose for an active ingredient. The regulatory context of use involves demonstration of a satisfactory performance of a PBPK absorption model and methodology of drug Y, assessing the impact of PSD of drug Y soft gel capsules on bioequivalence, supporting setting clinically relevant PSD specifications. In regards to the scientific rationale, this model is used to assess the impact of PSD on drug Y soft Y capsules on bioequivalence. A PBPK model for drug Y and its soft gel capsule drug products was developed and validated using literature data and data generated within the scope of a drug product development program. The data analysis contains a modeling analysis report, model and data files, and the orientation file. Consistent with the reusability of the MMF, this specific one, evaluating the impact of particle size distribution on bioequivalence, can be referenced by applicants 1, 2, 3, and 4. Mock example 3 involves a model master file on an MIE-supported alternative BE study design for long-acting injectables. Here, the model master file type is an MIE method validation for its intended purpose for one or more LAIs. The regulatory context of use involves the demonstration of the validity of an MIE-supported alternative BE study, such as an in silico continuation of PK profile using population pharmacokinetic modeling for a shorter BE study for one or more LAIs. Once validated, the established MIE-supported alternative BE study can be applied across a range of products. The MIE-supported alternative B study design was validated through virtual trial simulations of selected LAIs using population pharmacokinetic models available in the literature or model developed within the scope of a drug product development program. The established method was able to control the overall type 1 error rate at a regulatory accepted level. The model master file also contains data analysis components such as the model analysis report, model and data files, and the orientation file. This MMF on MIE-supported alternative B study design for long-acting injectables can then be referenced by NDA 1, 2, and 3. The last mock example for model master files involves an in silico immunogenicity risk assessment model for protein and protein-based therapeutics. The model master file type here is model development, verification, and validation process for its intended purpose for an active ingredient. The regulatory context of use of the MMF includes a validated in silico model for predicting immunogenicity risks in peptide and protein-based therapeutics. The model evaluates amino acid sequences to generate quantitative risk scores and identify regions of concern for immunogenicity. This provides a complementary tool to in vitro assays and clinical immunogenicity studies, reducing the experimental burden while maintaining confidence in risk assessments. The model's predictive performance was validated against in vitro assays, clinical immunogenicity data, and historical data to ensure accuracy and consistency across multiple submissions. The MAR, model data files, and orientation files supporting the data analysis are also an important component of the model master file, as discussed earlier. Here's a graphical representation of how MMF for in silico immunogenicity risks assessment can be referenced by either applicant 1 or 2 developing product A or applicant 3 developing product B versus applicant 4 developing product C. The same MMF can be used across multiple products as long as the context of use for each product align with what is described in the MMF. A novel molecular modification may need additional data and may trigger an amendment for an MMF. Now let's discuss how an MMF can be submitted. MMFs can be submitted as Type V DMFs used for FDA-accepted reference information. A DMF is neither approved nor disapproved. The DMF technical content is typically reviewed by the FDA only in connection with the review of a pre-market application. Type V DMFs for MMF submissions may be submitted on an ongoing basis. MMF should be submitted in the electronic technical document format and in accordance with the Drug Master File's guidance for industry. Submission of an MMF can take place in 2 steps. Step 1, interested parties may provide a letter of intent to submit a Type V DMF for an MMF submission to the DMF staff. They should include a clearly stated subject field and other necessary information. An example, letter of intent to submit Type V DMF for MMF submission to support ANDAs. They may also want to include a brief description of the MMF context of use, the scientific rationale supporting the MMF, the modeling analysis report, a summary of that report, and a summary of the data analysis performed within the scope of the MMF. Step 2 involves the submission of the Type V DMF according to the FDA draft guidance for industry drug master files and related information on the FDA's DMF webpage. The DMF Type 5 for MMF submissions should be provided following the electronic common technical document format, and the model selection should be based on the context of use of the modeling and simulation approach that is contained in the MMF. Please include MMF or model master file in the subject line of your main submission. Please include the DMF number in the file name of each file included in the submission. For any additional questions you may have regarding the MMF submission process, please reach out to mmf@fda.hhs.gov. In order to get the FDA's early input on your MMF development, you may consider the industry meeting pilot MIE program or control correspondence. In concluding this presentation, I would like to thank my colleagues at the Division of Quantitative Methods and Modeling for their valuable contributions to this presentation. I would like to specifically thank Dr. Fang, Dr. Yuqin Gong, and Dr. Mike Lee for contributing the mock examples for MMF. I would like to thank Dr. Fang, Dr. Babiskin, Dr. Zhang, and Dr. Landberger for their continuing support on this effort. And I would like to thank Dr. Skoda for very, very important conversations on drug master files and model master files. At this point, I would like to thank you for your attention. This is the end of my presentation. I will be available later at the Q&A section to take any questions you may have. I would like now to introduce to you Dr. Erin Skoda, who will be comparing MMF submissions to drug master files. Erin?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Eleftheria, for that introduction. My name is Erin, and I'm a chemist in the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality and the Office of Product Quality Assessment 3 at FDA. And my team is responsible for reviewing active pharmaceutical ingredients, or APIs, and we often review that information in drug master files, or DMFs. Today, I'll discuss established processes for drug master files to relay information on considerations for the newer model master files. A quick disclaimer that this presentation reflects my views and should not be construed to represent FDA's views or policies. I'd like to start with OPQ's overall goal and mission, which is shown here. Everyone deserves confidence in their next dose of medicine, and pharmaceutical quality assures the availability, safety, and efficacy of every dose. I'll start today by defining and describing drug master files, and then to give you an overview of what to expect when you submit a master file, I will go through a hypothetical timeline of DMF submission and then talk through the operational considerations of each of these. By now, you understand what model master files, or MMFs, are, and these MMFs are now submitted under the drug master file pathway as they're considered a drug master file. Drug master files are submissions to the FDA used to provide confidential, detailed information about facilities, processes, or articles used in the manufacturing, processing, packaging, and storing of human drug products. They allow parties to reference material without disclosing DMF contents to those parties. They are not required to be submitted by statute or regulation, so it's optional to reference the DMF, and they're neither approved nor disapproved. Instead, FDA reviews the technical contents of DMFs in connection with the review of the applications that reference them. For your awareness, there are currently 4 types of drug master files, and they will be shown here. Type 2 is for drug substances and related intermediates and drug products. Type 3 is for packaging material. Type 4 is for excipients, colorants, flavors, etc. And Type 5 is for FDA accepted reference information, now including MMFs. By leveraging the existing methods for these drug master files, the agency is able to accept model master files as this Type 5 DMF with processes that are already in place. So now we'll talk about these processes at a high level, and I'll provide some resources throughout and at the end of my presentation so you can obtain more details on submitting model master files. So we'll switch gears, and with that baseline understanding of DMFs in place, we'll walk through what a DMF timeline could look like. To orient you in the process, I've created a timeline of this hypothetical example, and in this example, my DMF has a filing issue and scientific deficiencies so that you can see an illustration of where you would receive communications on these types of matters. On the top are the actions taken by the DMF holder, and the steps completed by the agency are at the bottom. We'll talk in a bit more detail regarding the considerations for these steps in the coming slides. But the first step is for the holder to send in a letter of intent. For some DMF types, this isn't routinely completed. However, for Type 5 model master files, it's recommended per our FRN notice, or our FR notice, that you submit a letter of intent. This helps inform us about these, when to expect these new submission types. The holder will then obtain a pre-assigned DMF number, and this is the number that will appear on all of your submissions, so it's your DMF number moving forward. Then they'll submit a drug master file. The agency then completes an administrative filing review of that submission, and in this case we noted some comments, and so we send an administrative filing issue letter. Upon receipt of this letter, the DMF holder responds with an amendment to the DMF, and this is a response to administrative filing issue amendment. Once everything looks good with the administrative review, the agency will issue a DMF acknowledgement letter. Review of this then makes the DMF become active, and then review of the DMF generally commences after the DMF is referenced by an application. So once a reference comes in, and we'll talk about this in more detail, but it requires a letter of authorization. So once the reference comes in, the scientific assessment can begin. During the scientific assessment of this hypothetical drug master file, the assessment team noted some deficiencies and sends an information request, or IR, or a deficiency letter. It's important to note that prompt response to such letters really helps facilitate review and meeting goal dates of the referencing applications, and so it's important to respond promptly to these via an amendment response to letter. If you receive a deficiency letter and need clarification, a meeting request could be possible. And upon receipt of the amendment response, the agency continues to review the drug master file moving forward. So now that you've oriented yourself with the approximate timeline and order of steps related to a drug master file submission, we'll go through these steps in a little bit more detail. As you saw in the timeline, the first step in submitting the Type 5 DMF MMF is to submit a letter of intent. The email address for the letter submission is shown here, and you can refer back to Eleftheria's presentation for more information on that submission. Obtaining a pre-assigned number for your DMF, which is the number that will be used to identify your DMF moving forward, is done by emailing the agency at the email address shown here. In this request, it's important to include the holder name, address, US contact information, and the subject of the master file. This subject is also the title, and it's chosen by the holder. When you're requesting a pre-assigned number, I recommend that you follow the instructions that I've linked in this pre-assigned number link. It has step-by-step instructions on what you can do, and it's pretty detailed. After you have a DMF number, the DMF may be submitted. All DMFs should be submitted in ECTD format, and all DMFs except Type 3 are required to be submitted electronically. The ICH M4 guideline describes the format, and the DMF guidance linked on the resource page of my presentation offers additional guidance on the content of the DMF. Some tips that help the agency process your DMF are shown on the right. It's really helpful that in every submission you include FDA Form 3938, which I've linked here. This form provides all of the DMF holder and administrative information in a single standardized form and helps us minimize errors in processing and reviewing your submission. It's also helpful to include the designation for MMF or Model Master File on the cover letter to assure that the DMF goes to the right group. I also recommend that you see Jonathan Resnick's presentation on managing electronic DMF submissions and Vatsala Selvam's presentation on administrative aspects of managing a DMF for more information on master file submission considerations. So you may be wondering whether once you submit a DMF, whether the agency has received it or not. So the answer is you will not. You will not be left wondering. Once you submit a DMF, you will receive a letter. If there are issues with your submission, that letter type is an administrative filing issue letter. But if there are no administrative issues, you will receive an acknowledgement letter. Upon receipt of that DMF acknowledgement letter, the DMF becomes active and there's additional communication in the form of this quarterly list of active DMFs. This list is published quarterly and serves to transparently share all the DMFs that are active with the agency and lists the DMF number, type, status, submit date, holder, and subject or title. And as a reminder, this subject or title is determined by the DMF holder. Scientific assessment usually commences when the DMF is referenced by an application. But before we can start that review, we must receive a letter of authorization to allow us to review the DMF in connection with that referencing application. Letters of authorization should be submitted in both the DMF and in all applications that are granted right of reference. This DMF draft guidance provides additional information on the content and submission of the LOAs. Related to referencing, drug master files offer a lot of flexibility in the way they can be referenced. As I mentioned earlier, there is no requirement to reference a DMF, and the relevant information can instead be included in an application. If a DMF is used, it can be referenced by many application types, including ANDAs, NDAs, BLAs. BLAs can reference DMFs but cannot reference a Type 2 DMF, and with some specific exceptions. INDs can reference DMFs, and generic and new veterinary applications can reference DMFs. DMFs can also be referenced by other DMFs. Furthermore, an applicant may reference only a portion of a drug master file, allowing all parties to adapt as necessary to fit their needs. For example, an applicant could reference a single flavoring in a Type 4 DMF that includes information on multiple flavorings, or a single component in a Type 3 DMF that includes multiple packaging components. Or they can reference an intermediate in a Type 2 DMF for an API. So in this reaction scheme, instead of referencing the API, perhaps they could reference the DMF for intermediate Z. Likewise, this partial referencing can be extended to model master files as the applicant and holder see fit. It's important to note that these partial references in the letter of authorization, so please refer back to that DMF draft guidance for industry for information on that. The reference of a DMF by an application brings up the question of what information can the FDA share. The FDA can share very limited information on the application with the DMF holder and very limited information on the DMF with the applicant. With the DMF holder, we can share status, administrative, and technical information of their own DMF with the DMF holder itself. But we cannot share confidential application status information. So for example, an ANDA goal date with the DMF holder. And we cannot share application technical or scientific information. So this type of information that is included in an ANDA or other application isn't shared with the DMF holder. With the applicant, we can share public information such as the quarterly inventory list of active DMFs, and we can share the status information of a referenced DMF. So for example, whether the DMF is adequate or inadequate, since the approvability of the application is dependent on that DMF status. We cannot share confidential administrative or review information of the referenced DMF with the applicant. And so it's very important that the applicant and the DMF holder communicate between themselves as necessary to relay information that will help move their application and their DMF forward. Drug master files are not approved. Instead, they are either adequate or inadequate to support an application. So any deficiencies related to the DMF here that is being referenced by two different applications would be relayed, the deficiencies would be relayed to the DMF holder, as I mentioned on the previous slide. After a DMF is submitted, it can be changed later. These changes are called amendments. And amendments can be administrative in nature. So for example, a name change or contact info change, or they could be quality amendments. Quality amendments refer to changes in the technical content of the drug master file. It's important that quality amendments include a summary of changes so that it's very clear what's being changed from the previous versions. And for amendment review, the FDA assessors focus on assessing these quality changes that have been made since the last submission. When a holder submits an amendment, they should notify each affected applicant or sponsor who has referenced the DMF to any pertinent information. An advance warning is recommended to allow the applicant to supplement or amend any affected applications as needed, and this is described in the CFR reference shown here. This slide, as promised, has a list of important references. I want to point out that this top reference for FDA drug master files is our drug master file agency page, and it has a lot of links within it. So it's a really great place to start. To summarize, model master files can be submitted via existing FDA pathways for DMFs, and there's a lot of information available on how to submit DMFs and for operational considerations related to them. DMFs are confidential submissions to the FDA, and DMFs offer holders and applicants flexibility and a streamlined method for making changes or amendments to the DMFs. I would like to thank the individuals listed on this slide, Claude, Scott, Gianni, and Eleftheria, for their input on my presentation, and I'd like to thank CDER SBIA for the invitation to speak. Finally, I'd like to thank all of you for your time and attention, and I hope you stay for the discussion panel and Q&A panel following my talk.